Well, I've already spoken, so I'm going to ask the first question.
Okay.
I would like to ask you about the art you exhibited at the entry, how you made it, and what that process was like.
Okay. Well, I don't know how many of you were at the first event, but they were basically sort of drawings that I'd made at the start of my recovery, which was 3.5 years ago, that were kind of ways to express what the experience of losing language. I mean, I didn't obviously know this is what it was. You know, I didn't have the words that I have now to explain what it was, but it was just a form of expression where there was a language deficiency. So in a sense, it was speaking and communicating through what were very strange, you know, quite very. I don't think they're abstract because they're quite kind of figurative in their own way, but surreal, I suppose, drawings of what the experience was.
Do you think they were a very useful bridge between regaining some of the language that you've got, or do you think they were like an exercise in you busying your kind of creative urges without the same landscape of language you had before?
Yeah. It wasn't part of the recovery process in terms of linguistic recovery, but it felt like there was a kind of inherent need to express, and not having the tools, so kind of creating my own tools. You know, similarly to what you were saying, when there's a deficit of creativity or expression, something will replace it. So I think that's probably what was happening.
Is it a common thing, do you think? Do you think it is just something that happens to people who are going through their recovery, or more specific to you, the nature of the work?
I don't know, because I don't know many people that have had, you know, a similar experience to me at all. I know that creating is, you know, something that we kind of need to do as human beings, and that when there's a repression on that need, there'll be, you know, we'll find ways around it in order to be able to satisfy that urge.
I find them really fascinating because I think that I came very late in my life to art practice, and what I often find is that there's this regressive, desperate search for almost the holy grail of purposefulness that you're describing. So a lot of people create asemic writing, abstract art to do with letters, me included, looking for some way to feel that there isn't like an emptiness to them, that they aren't just abstract symbols that resemble things. You came from the exact opposite position. It's like a completely necessary use for the purpose, but it's incredibly similar to this like 20th century tradition of abstract writing and like asemic writing and all of these massive European traditions of like Christian Dotremont or this Henry Michaud. And it was so similar to that, it almost could have been that. But you did it for actual purpose rather than just to indulge your expression.
That's right, yeah. I wasn't trying to create art. I mean, it may be that somewhere in, because of the way, you know, where I grew up, the culture I grew up in, or the way that my brain developed in early childhood or whatever, it could be all kinds of external influences that had led to me creating those things. But certainly there was no vision when I was doing that. It was just doodles, you know, that needed to come out.
Well, they're better than most people's official artworks, I would say. So it's pretty strong doodling.
Yeah. But yes, so I wanted to ask you about this exhibition and asemic.
Yeah, asemic, yeah. Asemic writing.
What's that? And what's this?
So the exhibition is me writing a novel while in the gallery with strict conditions, which I've broken quite a few of. The purpose was I would write onto the walls a novel that I wasn't allowed to pre-prepare by hand for a certain amount of hours, and then at the end I would paint it over. And I wasn't really able to facilitate a plan for the novel to the content. Actually what happened is I started writing on the paint and just shit the bed and was so scared about how much time I would waste that I then put scrolls up to write on. And then after 2 scrolls, which was 10 hours, I was in so much pain from writing that I had to just pull it down and write at the table. So I cheated loads, but I've still stuck to the notion when I'm writing it in situ. And really what it's about is that when you write immediately, not automatically, because people ask me it's automatic writing, you actually stick to narrative. So I never stick to narrative in my other work, and I do in this case because I have to write so much so quick. It's very banal. And it's also, I suppose, very much about making people look at writing as a visual tool. Because all people see when they see writing, my background is poetry especially, is content. All they see is what the signifier is telling you in terms of content. They never look at the space. And when you walk in, you can't really read this. You know it's language, but it's just lines of strokes. And that's really what I wanted. I wanted people to come in and not read it in a way. And that's been some of the nicest things, that people come in and just, everyone, probably everyone here too, walks in, looks and goes, don't know where to start, won't start. And just looks at it, and that's beautiful, that's what I wanted. And asemic writing is the attempt to create new languages in abstract writing techniques, which is what will happen with this. So it starts readable, and then as it's going to cover the walls, it's just going to start going off into abstraction. So it shares some concerns with far less useful reasons with your work.
Did you start with a narrative in mind, or did it develop as you began to write?
Developed very much, and it's ended up becoming something quite weirdly personal about where I grew up and like the countryside and stuff I would never write about, the most boring things to me, identity-led writing, and but it's just because what else am I going to do? Like, I'm just stuck in this room smoking away. I've got no chance. I want to ask you one more question about World Without Words. I'm really fascinated whether or not, when we talked about developing the project, you talked about what you just mentioned, because you mentioned it, I'm going to ask you it, moving away from the biographical nature of some of your explorations. You know? I'm really interested in how you see that now that World Without Words is going, and that your film is doing so well and stuff, whether you see yourself like still really keen to get away from the notion that you represent ideas rather than you just talk about them objectively. Do you know what I mean?
So the question is...
For example, with The World Without Words, would you speak again about your film or about your own experience or journey, or are you just really keen to move away, or is it something important to hold on to?
I don't want the experience or the change in my brain to define me to any major degree, but at the same time I really, really value it. I think it's the best thing. I'm so glad I survived, but it really was the most profoundly meaningful kind of adventure that anybody could hope for. And I've been really, really lucky because of the conditions in which it happened, the people around me during the process of recording, the making of the film, regaining the ability to tell stories, to create narratives through the making of the film. So I wouldn't sort of say I don't want anything to do with it at all. I want to use the experience and use the story and the film and projects moving forward like this one to explore, to explore this mysterious brain, mind, language thing.
I hope you do, because my theory about what you're doing for people is very healthy for people. My theory has always been from the start, when I saw your film at the start, was that you are, as I've often expressed, despite yourself, or because you're so beautiful and luminous, the angel of death. That's how I think of you, as this like memento mori on the screen who looms up in front of people like this beautiful case of survival and will, who just talks about how fragile life is and how you have survived and you have come through that, and you're here expressing yourself so eloquently. But I think that the thing that you strike in people, which when I saw people watch it in the cinema when they felt kind of ill, is this fear of mortality. People want to avoid that beautiful kind of humbling thing. I think you're kind of a walking advert for that, some medieval angel come to remind people they're going to perish. So please keep reminding them that. It's very good.
That's a great compliment, because you talking of these young guys who don't even think about their mortality or about their fragility and just think about the fight, it kind of connects with that the fragility and the mortality theme that it all began with. So, thank you.
Cool. So it's a pleasure. Thank you very much for coming. There's free wine, and we will open the door so you can breathe again.